In this video, we'll distill Machiavelli's cold, clear-eyed view of power into 21 practical laws. We'll see how these ideas from The Prince and the Discourses map onto modern life, leadership, business, politics, and everyday influence. This is an analysis, not an endorsement. Understand power so it can't blindside you. Imagine you walk into the room with nothing but your name and your posture. Before you speak, the room has already decided who you are. Machiavelli would tell you that power begins in those first 2 seconds, before the facts, before the plan, before the truth. Men judge more by the eyes than by the hands, he writes, which is his ruthless way of saying, people believe what they can see and feel right now, so you design what they see. You curate your surface until your surface becomes a kind of armor. Start with appearances, not vanity, but strategy. Your reputation is a moving force field that precedes you into every meeting and lingers long after you leave. To cultivate it, choose a narrow identity you can deliver on repeatedly. The fixer who finishes, the calm operator, the rainmaker. Repeat it until others repeat it for you. Speak with economy, control your tempo, slow enough to signal you're not pressed, quick enough to cut off spirals. Borrow environments that frame you as credible. Rooms, stages, introductions, because context edits you in the minds of others. If you must change a perception, do it with a spectacle. One clean, undeniable act that reshelves you in a different category. A mediocre explanation loses to a vivid demonstration every time. Appearances seed authority, but incentives lock it in. Assume self-interest. Not because people are evil, but because they are busy and bounded. They march toward what feels less costly and more rewarding. If your plan depends on people sacrificing for your dream, your plan depends on disappointment. Translate your goal into their payoff. Don't ask, will they help? Ask, under what structure would helping me be their best move? Put a concrete win where you want cooperation. Credit on the project, measurable upside, visible proximity to power. For gatekeepers, minimize risk. For strivers, maximize runway. For skeptics, offer reversibility. Talk less about vision and more about next safe step. If you must trade, trade in what they actually value. Time, status, access, not only in what you value. This creates alignment, but Machiavelli insists on something colder. When you must do something unpopular, do it under the banner of necessity. Human beings forgive fate faster than they forgive choice. Frame hard moves as responses to pressures bigger than you. The market shifted, the budget contracted, the treaty forced your hand. In statecraft, he calls this fortuna. In modern life, it's policy, compliance, the board, the algorithm. You do not abdicate responsibility, you stage it. Deliver the unpleasant news with data and deadlines, not drama. Offer a narrow corridor of alternatives so people feel agency without steering the ship. And use timing. Injuries should be inflicted all at once. In one rough winter, benefits should arrive in a gentle spring. A single discrete shock lets people metabolize the pain. 1,000 paper cuts teach them to hate you. The choreography matters. You consolidate the pain, then you narrate the rebuild. Think of a company that must cut a failing product. Don't bleed it for a year. Announce the exit, do the logistics fast, tell a clean story about focus, and immediately redirect talent and capital to a visible winner. We had to, so we did. Now this is where we're going. People can live with necessity. They revolt against chaos. Still, even necessity leaves fingerprints, which is why Machiavelli teaches the art of clean hands. You do not let your personal brand absorb every bruise. You create institutional roles that metabolize the ugliness of governing. Compliance delivers the no. Legal enforces the guardrail. The operations calendar dictates the cutover date. In princely Italy, he wrote about ministers who wielded harsh authority, so the prince could later appear merciful. The modern version is separation of functions and clear process. The point is not to hide in cowardice, it is to make sure your symbol remains aspirational while your system gets gritty. There's a famous episode he recounts with Cesare Borgia in the Romagna. Order was restored by a hard man tasked with stamping out lawlessness, swiftly, brutally. Once stability returned, Borgia publicly removed him, displaying the costs of cruelty and reclaiming the image of justice. We do not copy the cruelty, but we can study the structure, assign the necessary severity to a role. Once stability is reached, change the face of the regime. In organizations, that can look like a turnaround chief who owns the layoffs, followed by a growth lead who owns the hiring. Same strategy, different symbolism. You protect the legitimacy of the helm. Clean hands also means channeling conflict sideways. If two teams must compete for a scarce resource, set criteria and deadlines in advance. Let the scoreboard decide. If rumors must be killed, let facts do it. Publish dashboards, release minutes, move conversations to recorded forums. You are not the villain, the standard is. Your job is to be the custodian of the rules, not the visible fist enforcing them at whim. The more your system can say no for you, the more you stay the person who makes the future say yes. Now we arrive at the keystone. Make yourself the solution. Most people sell answers. Machiavelli designs the question so his answer is inevitable. Define the problem space so that your abilities, your alliances, and your assets are the natural path through it. If the environment rewards speed, become the only operator with pre-approval to act. If it rewards consensus, become the only person trusted by every faction. If complexity is the barrier, become the translator who can pull decisions out of the fog. You do this by accumulating specific leverage. Build a map of the system. Who truly authorizes change, who shapes opinion, who controls information, who can slow you down. Then place yourself at the intersection that converts their inputs into outcomes. Own the weekly agenda where priorities become real. Chair the risk review where projects live or die. Maintain the relationship with the one partner no one else can replace. If you control the bottleneck, you control the flow, not by bullying, but by being the only person who can keep the machine smooth. Be strategic in competence. There is a difference between being very good and being necessary. Very good can be ignored. Necessary cannot. Necessary means you hold a capability that is scarce, verifiable, and painful to replace. Scarce, few can do it. Verifiable, everyone can see you did it. Painful to replace, your departure produces immediate costs. For a modern leader, that might be the playbook for landing key clients, the bridge between engineering and sales, or the trust of a crucial community. You let others be brilliant. You become the person without whom the engine stalls. Narrative locks this in. You do not just do the work, you teach people what the work means. This integration isn't a feature, it's our moat. This alliance is not a handshake, it's our distribution future. You repeat the meaning until the meaning becomes common sense. People fight harder for ideas they think they invented, so seed the language in their mouths. The highest form of power is when people argue for your plan as if it were theirs. There's a quieter layer, controlled humility. Machiavelli never asks you to be arrogant. He asks you to be inevitable. You deflect praise to allies in public, then reward them in private. You own mistakes fast, circumscribe them even faster, and return to momentum. You do not gossip down or punch sideways. You develop the habit of ending meetings with crisp assignments and dates because power loves clocks. When the future arrives on time under your watch, people internalize that you are the safest pair of hands for risky things. Be careful with mercy. He warns that being loved is optional. Being hated is fatal. The line between the two is consistency. If you promise predictability, deliver it even when it hurts. If you must be severe, do not be petty. Petty cruelty invites vendettas. Principled severity produces grudging respect. And remember the geometry of attention. Reward in public to amplify the behavior you want replicated. Correct in private to protect dignity and reduce factional stories. Information is your weather report. Keep separate channels for truth and for theatre. Truth. Small, unglamorous meetings where people can tell you what is breaking without fear. Theatre. Visible moments where you demonstrate that the machine is healthy. If you contaminate the first with posturing, you go blind. If you contaminate the second with panic, you spread disease. The prince needs both, one for sight, one for story. Finally, cultivate reversible doors. When you advance under uncertainty, Design exits before entrances. We'll pilot this for 30 days with a rollback plan. This makes boldness cheap and reduces the coalition you need to act. People join moves that don't trap them, and when you must commit irreversibly, do it only after gathering enough chips that the outcome appears preordained. Risk loudly when success is likely. Risk quietly when learning is the point. Put it all together and the shape appears. You enter with an aura that predisposes cooperation. You arrange the field so that helping you is rational. You blame necessity for the pain and take credit for the healing. You let roles and rules absorb the ugliness while you embody direction, and you architect the question so that your presence is the answer. That is not villainy, it is literacy in power, so you can protect what matters, and so power does not happen to you. Power is a story before it is a structure. The side that frames reality wins the first and most important battle, what everyone thinks the battle is about. Facts rarely travel naked. They arrive dressed in language, metaphors, and metrics. If you don't choose those, someone else will, and you'll be forced to fight inside their picture. So you become the architect of frames. Name the project before the critics do. Choose the yardstick that favors your approach. Seed the metaphor that shrinks your opponent's best move to a footnote. Cost becomes investment. Delay becomes stability testing. Pivot becomes strategic redirection. This isn't spin, it's map making. People move according to the map on the wall. Make narrative a process, not an improvisation. You pre-brief allies before major moves so they repeat the same language. You debrief right after to lock the meaning in place. You collect the best one-sentence explanation like a weapon, short enough to be repeated, concrete enough to survive skepticism. You time announcements when attention is available and rival messages are weak. You choose exemplars, a single vivid story that makes the abstract undeniable. One customer who was saved, one pilot that doubled throughput, one failure you fixed, and the lesson you drew. You publish simple dashboards because numbers turn debates into direction. And you standardize your vocabulary so the team speaks in chorus. One term for success, one term for risk, one term for threshold. Precision beats passion when people are deciding what to believe. Controlling the narrative does not mean manufacturing fantasy. It means foregrounding relevance and sequencing perception. If there's a flaw, reveal it early, name it yourself, and connect it to your solution. If there's a strength, dramatize it at the moment of maximum receptivity. When rivals attack, don't wrestle in their mud, root around with a higher frame. If they call you reckless, talk about time to learning and risk caps. If they call you cautious, talk about asset protection and compounding returns. The key is to make their critique look like a category error. Once your frame becomes how adults think, their message starts to sound like noise. From there, choose respect over affection. Machiavelli's warning is ancient but permanent. Love floats, respect compels. To be respected, become predictable in principle and variable in tactic. Predictable in principle means people can forecast your decisions from your stated standards. You care about impact over theatre, truth over flattery, results over excuses. Variable in tactic means you're flexible on the route, happy to take advice, happy to revise a plan, but immovable on the outcome. This combination builds the reputation that matters most, consequence. You are the person whose choices change the calendar, the budget, the org chart, the scoreboard. Respect begins at the boundary. Say no cleanly and early. If a task does not align with the priorities you published, decline with a reference to that list, not to your mood. When you must enforce a rule, do it without apology and without drama. When someone performs, give credit specifically and publicly. When they fail standards, correct privately and concretely. Generosity is a multiplier when it's paired with firmness. Without firmness, it turns into a tax people expect you to pay. Don't confuse access with closeness. Overexposure breeds familiarity. Familiarity erodes mystique, and mystique is part of authority. Maintain rhythm in your availability. Present when the stakes are real, absent when your presence would only dilute the room. Fear often gets misread in Machiavelli. He doesn't ask you to terrify, he asks you to be consequential. People will not like every decision you make, but they should trust that you make them for the stated mission, not for whims or grudges. That trust survives disagreement. It's built by small consistencies. You start on time. You close what you open. You treat friends and skeptics by the same scoreboard. The more people can predict you from your principles, the freer you are to make hard calls without igniting paranoia. None of this works if your victories require others to lose. Win with their interests, and you can expand the coalition without spending moral capital. Start by inventorying currencies. Not everyone chases money. Many chase time, status, certainty, access, impact, or identity. A regulator wants proof of compliance and a contained blast radius. An engineer wants elegant constraints and less churn. A salesperson wants faster cycles and cleaner value propositions. A community partner wants visibility and reciprocity. Translate your plan into each currency. The same decision can be framed as risk reduction, prestige gain, or workload smoothing. Design the bargain so that each ally sees themselves as a rational actor making their best move. Do this structurally, not only rhetorically. Attach explicit upside to the behaviors you're asking for. Revenue share, priority queue access, first rights on future features, joint press. Write the give and the get into the process so rewards are automatic, not discretionary. Where you can, replace promises with mechanisms. If people are rewarded by the system for aligning with you, the relationship doesn't depend on your mood, it depends on physics. And where interests clash, isolate the real kernel of conflict. Many fights are over symbols, not resources. Others are over sequencing, not substance. Offer alternates that preserve your core while paying their price. A different public label, a phased rollout, a pilot that proves their concern wrong in a bounded sandbox. When you meet principled opposition, don't try to bribe it, interrogate it. Ask for the condition under which they'd change their mind. Put that condition into a measurable experiment and commit to abiding by the readout. If they refuse a fair test, they reveal themselves as political rather than principled, which makes later hard moves easier to defend. If they accept and you're right, you gain an unexpected ally. If you're wrong, you learn cheaply and keep legitimacy. Allies are oxygen, but oxygen is flammable. Preserve optionality so you don't suffocate when the weather shifts. Optionality isn't indecision, it's deliberately maintaining multiple executable paths until the world selects which one is wise. Keep small bets alive in parallel. 2 suppliers to avoid hostage risk. 2 prototypes to reduce technical lock-in. 2 narratives tested with small audiences before the brand-wide reveal. Use reversible choices to buy information. A pilot with rollback teaches you more than a memo ever will, and your reputation for reversibility lowers the political cost of trying bold things. Guard your calendar against premature commitment. People will try to lock you into detailed promises early, often under the banner of alignment. Align on direction, leave room on method. Mark decisions as provisional pending new data and specify the data. Publish review gates in advance so pivots look like process, not panic. Structure contracts with escape hatches tied to objective triggers. Keep the critical capabilities in-house even when you outsource execution. Maintain the talent or the know-how to rebuild if partners fail. You are not gaming anyone. You're acknowledging that Fortuna throws curveballs and wise leadership keeps a spare bat. There is a moral dimension to optionality. It reduces the need to lie. When you avoid overcommitting, you don't have to invent stories to cover changes. You can tell the truth. We designed this to learn. We learned X, so we're doing Y. People can handle change if you make it a feature, not a betrayal. That credibility compounds, which is itself a form of power. Optionality exists to be cashed in. Once conditions align, once the data confirms, the coalition stands, the rival is distracted, you strike decisively. The point of patience is explosion, not drift. Speed is a message. It tells the world you were ready. Preparation makes speed feel like elegance rather than panic. Before the move, you pre-position approvals, draft the comms, rehearse the failure modes, define the first 48 hours of stabilization. At the moment of action, you take the hill in one sprint. No stutter, no half step that invites counter-mobilization. Decisive action focuses on the center of gravity, not the periphery. Identify the single lever that, when pulled, changes everything else: price, default settings, org structure, distribution agreement, regulatory classification. Most leaders waste force on edges because edges feel safer. Machiavelli saves force for the hinge and accepts the noise that follows. When you change a hinge, you change the story other people can tell about you. That is the real aim of decisive action. You don't just accomplish a task, you rewrite expectations. Execution builds its own shield if you anticipate the backlash and choreograph the aftermath. Immediately after the strike, flood the zone with clarity. Who's accountable? What's different today? Where to go with questions? What gets measured next week? Replace the old pathways with new ones right away so people can't drift back to habit. Confirm early evidence publicly. First wins, first savings, first adoption numbers, so supporters feel vindicated and fence-sitters reframe the move as inevitable. Rivals thrive on ambiguity, starve them. None of this requires cruelty, it requires adult timing. You hold your options open while you build the stage. You give people honest ways to join you by tying your gain to their gain. You narrate so the essential is visible and the incidental is quiet. Then, when the line is ready, you cross it in one clean step and keep walking. Every organization is an archipelago, not a continent. Clusters of interest connected by bridges of convenience. Factions form the moment resources are scarce and status is visible. Your job is not to eradicate factions but to tune them. A world with zero factions is a world with no ambition. A world with one faction is a monarchy with fragile glass. Balance begins with a map. List the blocks: finance, product, sales, ops, compliance, community, board, external partners, their leaders, their currencies, and their choke points. Who can slow you down? Who can embarrass you? Who can legitimize you? Draw the arrows of dependence, funding, headcount, access, narrative, and then introduce cross-cutting ties so no single block sits on a solitary throne. Replace straight lines with triangles. Never let a mission-critical stream report into a lone gatekeeper with no peer. Pair product with operations under a shared outcome metric. Pair sales with customer success under a shared retention target. Overlap incentives, so cooperation is the path of least resistance. Publish a two-keys rule for high-impact decisions. No one person signs a check that can sink the ship. Where rivalry already exists, sharpen it in a way that produces value. Create standardized scoreboards, same definitions, same reporting cadence, so competition moves from gossip to numbers. When two teams want the same scarce slot, run a time-boxed bake-off with predefined criteria rather than a whisper campaign. Let sunlight adjudicate ambition. Give factions places to spend heat without burning the house. Advisory councils, RFC processes, quarterly challenge sessions where dissent is ritualized and timed. These are pressure valves that prevent coalition building in back rooms. Keep the agenda yours. What questions are in bounds? What evidence counts when the debate ends? Decision rights must be explicit. If people don't know when the arguing stops, they argue forever. Publish a calendar of gates, discovery arrow, commit arrow, build arrow, launch, and train the culture that the cost of missing a gate is a loss of influence at the next one. The deepest stabilizer isn't structure, it's predictable reward. People aren't loyal to slogans, they're loyal to systems that pay out on time. Build a ladder of loyalty that anyone can climb. Clear criteria for recognition, raises, ownership, visibility, and autonomy. Tie each rung to behaviors that protect the mission. Hitting goals, lifting peers, telling the truth early, stewarding customers. The key is automation. Rewards should trigger from metrics and rituals, not from your mood. If a rep nails their number and their accounts are healthy, the bonus lands at the same time every month. If an engineer deletes debt and ships reliability, their promotion packet isn't a negotiation. It's a milestone. Make the rewards memorable. Small money, big symbolism beats big money, small symbolism. Name the wins in public, tie them to your values in a single sentence. Speed with safety, truth without drama. And attach a concrete privilege, priority staffing, conference slots, the next moonshot. Pair positive reinforcement with protection. Loyalty is fragile when one political storm can erase a career. Create due process before consequences. Publish what triggers an investigation, who sits on the panel, how evidence is weighed. Fear of arbitrary punishment breeds silent conspiracies. Fear of fair punishment cleans the air. Machiavelli would tell you to convert rivals rather than crush them when possible, because a repurposed enemy brings both talent and testimony. Co-opting talent starts with accurate flattery. Diagnose the rival's true source of power, technical mastery, network, narrative reach, street credibility, and offer a portfolio that expands it under your banner. Parity plus prestige is the formula. Equal or slightly better title and scope, plus a visible platform you control, task force lead, co-author of a flagship initiative, keeper of a strategic partnership. Give them skin in your upside that can't be replicated outside, equity that vests against team outcomes, a revenue share on a category you're about to grow, access to a distribution channel only you own. Integration is choreography. Stage their first 90 days so they can score a real, undeniable win in your colors. Pair them with an internal ally who translates norms and keeps them from stepping on landmines. Announce the new alliance in language that protects their dignity and your authority. We competed hard. We'll build harder together. Set red lines early, what they can change, what they must adopt, where dissent belongs. People don't betray homes they helped design. Invite them to co-author one norm that matters to them, then anchor them to two norms that matter to you. This exchange makes the culture feel like a negotiated peace, not a surrender. Sometimes co-option fails or is unwise. Then you isolate the threat, not with theatre, but with plumbing. First, separate issues from people in public. We are evaluating the process, not the personality. Move decisions out of private channels into logged forums where facts outcompete charisma. Remove single points of failure. Rotate the sign-off role. Split the budget line. Add observers to critical meetings. Open a second information path from the threatened domain straight to you so the rival cannot starve you of truth. The aim is to shrink their surface area quietly. Fewer levers, fewer secrets, fewer hostages. If conflict must be engaged, do it in daylight under a procedure you would accept if it were used against you. Set terms, evidence windows, reply windows, who can speak, what the outcomes could be. Document everything. When you act, explain the rule that was broken, the examples, and the matching consequence. Avoid adjectives, use verbs and numbers. Humiliation is a strategic error. It creates martyrs. Dignified removal, role change, scope reduction, exit with a clean narrative, starves martyrdom and teaches the room the only lesson you want them to learn. Rules protect the mission, and the mission protects everyone's future. The inverse of isolation is coalition design. Factions become stabilizing when you give them shared projects that cannot succeed without each other. Build braided initiatives with interlocking dependencies and mutual upside. Sales can't hit the new target unless product ships a specific improvement. Product can't ship unless ops approves a new tooling budget. Ops won't approve unless finance unlocks a tranche tied to a leading indicator that sales controls. Publish the chain so each link sees how the others eat. Then celebrate the whole chain when it holds. Nothing kills infighting like a public scoreboard where everyone's needle moves together. Loyalty deepens when people feel seen beyond utility. Conduct post-victory audits focused not on what went wrong, but on who quietly made things right. Debt paid, crises absorbed, reputations protected. These are the invisible acts that hold institutions together. Reward them with the currency of insiders. Time with you, early drafts, influence over naming. Reserve a small discretionary budget for gratitude grants you can issue within 24 hours of learning about such acts. Speed is the respect signal. The amount is less important than the immediacy. Be explicit that loyalty to the mission beats loyalty to you. Otherwise, you birth a court, not a company. When someone disagrees in good faith with evidence, protect them even if their stance costs you face. You are teaching the room that truth has air cover. When someone flatters you while starving the system of truth, correct them publicly and pivot the praise to the quiet truth-tellers. You are teaching the room how to earn attention. Punishment sits at the bottom of the toolbox, not the top, and it works only because it is rare. The point of a memorable consequence is general deterrence, not personal vengeance. Set thresholds in advance. Intent, was there malice or neglect? Impact, did it endanger the mission or people? Recurrence, pattern or one-off? Substitutability, can we easily repair the damage? The minimum viable consequence that restores order is the right one. Too small, and it invites testing. Too large, and it invites fear, which breeds lies, which breed risk. When the time comes, act once, clearly and completely. Don't escalate in tiny steps that train the organization to ignore the first 3 warnings. Communicate to the degree necessary to maintain trust. What happened? What rule? What action? Then turn the page and fill the agenda with forward motion. After a consequence, give the culture something constructive to do. A new process, a checklist, a training, a dashboard. People metabolize shock by taking useful action. If you leave them with speculation, they will invent their own exercise, rumor. Your cadence is the culture. Host a standing health check where representatives from each faction surface frictions with a shared template. What we're trying to do, what blocks us, what we propose, what we need from others. Ban ad hominem, force specifics. Close the loop by deciding in the room or by scheduling the decision and naming the decider. When you do decide, echo the reasons in your published principles so choices feel cumulative, not episodic. The more decisions rhyme, the less energy factions spend forecasting chaos. Ambition needs lanes. Create fellowships, tiger missions, and rotating special assignments that let high-agency people step into brightness without necessarily stepping on throats. Publish a transparent path to influence so back-channeling looks like what it is, the long road. Match stretch assignments with safety nets, co-leads, clear scopes, exit ramps, so smart people can say yes without betting their careers on a coin flip. Your stars shouldn't have to defect to be seen. Finally, invest in the stories your rivals tell themselves about you. Reputation is a foreign policy. External allies, press, partners, regulators, communities are your extended faction. Meet them before you need them. Share your playbook, your thresholds, your red lines. When conflict arises, they should already know your posture under pressure. A leader who balances factions inside and credibility outside becomes difficult to box in. Enemies find fewer ears. Friends find it easier to defend you without being asked. The pattern is consistent across courts and companies. You prevent single points of failure. You convert bright enemies into brighter partners. You reward on schedule and punish on principle. You use process to lower temperature and story to raise purpose. Above all, you make it safer to join you than to jostle you. In that climate, alliances thicken, loyalty matures from transaction to identity, and conflict becomes a forge rather than a fire. Times have temperaments, and power belongs to the people who match them. In one season, the world rewards audacity. A storm tears up the old paths, incumbents are slow, the crowd is disoriented. In another, the world punishes risk and pays a premium for steadiness. Institutions are humming, the margins are thin, and every deviation looks like a defect. Machiavelli called the weather of history fortuna, and he warned that a single style of leadership, always bold or always cautious, eventually collides with a season that makes that style fatal. The skill is diagnostic before it is heroic. Watch for regime signals. Volatility in outcomes despite stable inputs means chaos. Stable outcomes despite noisy inputs means order. When chaos rises, substitute speed for polish and range for precision. Commit in sprints, widen the aperture for bets, and accept that correctness will arrive iteratively. When order returns, invert. Narrow the portfolio, increase standards, lengthen review gates, and hunt small efficiencies that compound. The same leader, 2 modes. Your virtue is the ability to shift without looking like you changed your mind. Build instruments that make the season legible. Maintain a short list of weather gauges. Time to decision for your rivals, variance in customer demand, regulatory posture tightening or loosening, capital cheap or dear, talent flowing in or out. Don't read headlines, read half-lives. How long before a truth decays into a maybe? Short half-lives mean act, Long half-lives mean refine. Pair the gauges with archetypes so your team knows which playbook you're running. Storm rules or harvest rules. Under storm rules, decisions are reversible by design. Authority is pushed to the edges and the KPI is learning rate. Under harvest rules, decisions are sticky, authority recentralizes into standards and audits, and the KPI is defect rate. People can tolerate rapid shifts in tactic if the mode switch is named and the rules are coherent. Reform is where timing bleeds into texture. Nothing is harder, Machiavelli says, than introducing a new order, because the beneficiaries of the old one are certain and the beneficiaries of the new are uncertain. The practical answer is staging. You reform as quickly as the social fabric can absorb without tearing. Injuries still land once. Reforms often land in steps. Think of reform as migration, not demolition. Instead of flipping the whole company to a new operating model, stand up a fully formed future island with end-to-end authority, procurement, hiring, tooling, then build bridges that let teams cross voluntarily once the island proves its advantages. Publish a migration ladder. What changes at step 1, step 2, step 3, so nobody confuses motion with chaos. Make each rung self-reinforcing. Every step should deliver a visible win. Fewer handoffs, faster cycle time, cleaner incentives that pulls people to the next. Sequence matters. Change the language first, then the ledger. Naming reshapes expectations. Accounting locks them in. If you're moving from feature count to reliability as your value proposition, rename roadmaps to reliability plans, add error budgets to executive reviews, and only then rewrite bonus structures. Ritual precedes rule because ritual is how humans rehearse new norms. Pilot the reform with a high-status team that can withstand turbulence. Give them extra air cover and extra measurement. Broadcast honest readouts. When you scale, protect the cadence. Fixes on Fridays. Metrics on Mondays. Retros that produce one less rule and one more behavior. People accept new rules when they can see themselves inside them. Every reform eats resources, which creates a moral hazard. We keep zombie projects alive because killing them would force us to admit we were wrong. Cut losses early or you will pay for them twice, once in capital and again in credibility. The trick is to pre-commit the guillotine before you fall in love. Define kill switches at the moment of enthusiasm. If by week 8 we don't see a leading indicator to B by factor C, we shut this down or shrink the scope by half. Tie that condition to a calendar invite you cannot ignore. Separate builders from judges. The person most in love with the idea should not own the decision to end it. Conduct tombstone reviews that ask only 3 questions: what we believed, what we learned, what would have changed our minds sooner. Reward honest autopsies, not undead narratives. Sunk cost is a political phenomenon as much as a financial one. People defend bad bets because their identity is attached to them. Reduce the identity cost of ending things. Offer clean exits that preserve prestige. The project stops. The person graduates to a harder problem. Give the team a visible win you can save from the wreckage, code reused, a partner relationship warmed, a data set that will seed a future product. Ending well is an asset. It signals to the whole organization that truth is safe and that your loyalty is to the mission, not to any single idea. Rapid endings create power vacuums, and vacuums breed conspiracies. Leave no vacuum is not a slogan, it's an operational discipline. When you remove a leader, kill a product, or merge 2 fiefdoms, you owe the system a stabilization plan inside 72 hours. Replace authority with process immediately. Who signs what, which inbox routes where, what the new meeting is called, what day it lands on, what gets decided there. Publish a 1-page now what. Current state, interim owner, escalation path, first metric we'll watch, next review date. Move the old signage physically, rename channels, redirect URLs, retire dashboards, so muscle memory doesn't resurrect the past in a dozen small ways. Vacuums are especially dangerous at the boundary between departments. Create bridge offices during transitions, temporary, time-boxed structures with the sole mandate to prevent drift. Staff them with operators who have no designs on the permanent throne. Give them a shutdown date and judge them by one metric: time to steady state. In parallel, flood the narrative zone. Rumor grows in silence. You don't have to over-explain, but you must over-communicate cadence. Even a short message: we're in week 2 of 6. Here's what changed today. Here's what stays the same. Here's where to surface what's breaking prevents a dozen stories from metastasizing. If you want the game to outlast you, build succession like a product, not like a goodbye. Start with a map of critical functions, not names. For each, document the non-deliverables, the tacit pieces of the role that don't appear on org charts. Back-channel trust with a regulator, the weekly 7 a.m. call where 2 rivals make peace, the 3 instincts that have saved you from disaster. Make these explicit, then design redundancy. 2 in the box is messy but anti-fragile. Pair a rising operator with an incumbent on the work that would sink the ship if dropped, and rotate who owns which quarter. You are teaching the organization to see roles as systems instead of personalities. Succession is also about talent markets inside your walls. If the only path to power is through you, you've already failed. Carve multiple avenues, expert tracks with real status and pay, rotational leadership that exposes rising people to finance, ops, product, crisis fellowships that throw high-agency people at gnarly cross-functional problems for 90 days. Publish the criteria for entering these paths and the criteria for exiting them. The opacity that flatters a single leader starves a bench. A deep bench makes you freer, not weaker. You become less a sovereign and more a steward. Guard against the favorite who becomes a threat. Promote based on proof of system building, not only personal brilliance. The test is simple. When they leave a room, do things move faster or slower? Give would-be successors assignments that require coalition, not just excellence. Integrations, restructures, standards. Make sure each has at least one real loss on their record and can talk about it without either collapsing or blaming phantoms. Confidence after failure is succession material. Invulnerability is a liability dressed as charisma. Exiting on your terms is the last and sharpest expression of control. Most leaders leave too late, leaving their legend to be written by their enemies and their protégés' mistakes. Leave when your replacement is ready, your reforms have stabilized, and the next season requires a temperament you don't intend to grow. That's not cowardice, it's category sense. Choose the hill you depart from. Engineer a final, undeniable win that frames your legacy. Ship the platform migration, settle the regulatory suit, close the distribution alliance. Then, choreograph the handoff like a product launch. Joint appearances, dual-signed memos, overlapping signatures on 2 or 3 pivotal decisions, so the room experiences continuity as muscle memory, not as a promise. Control the story without smothering the successor. Your farewell language should be past-focused, what we built, role-focused, what the role now requires, and future-deferential, what they will do next, not person-worshipping or shadow-casting. If you move upstairs, to chair, to special envoy, to founder at large, write your new job like a constraint. What you will no longer do, who you will no longer call directly, which decisions you do not comment on publicly. If you want to preserve influence, preserve boundaries, fog sabotages both of you. Should you leave entirely, keep your counsel scarce and your advice costly. A legend who opines on every small turn becomes a blogger about their own past. There is a practical test for whether the exit is truly on your terms. Could you walk away for 90 days and return to find your principles alive and your metrics green? If yes, you built an institution. If no, you built a tent revival around your personality. The world may applaud both. Only one survives weather. Write your decline plan alongside your growth plan. Sunset your own authorities before someone does it for you. Convert relationships you personally hold into institutional ties, shared inboxes, rotating meeting ownership, documented cadences. Build a library of living documents, not monuments. Playbooks with version histories, norms that can be amended, dashboards people actually open. All of this, reading the season, pacing reform, ending early, sealing vacuums, raising successors, timing your exit, turns leadership from theatre into architecture. You become less the hero at the center and more the engineer of flows, attention, authority, information, reward. And the engineer's satisfaction is clean, systems that don't shudder when touched, decisions that rhyme across time, a future that does not need you to be brave every morning to keep it from collapsing. You haven't defeated Fortuna, you've learned to surf her moods without drowning in them.